Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're discussing the breaking news of the University of Michigan dismissing their head coach, Sherrone Moore, with cause. This is due to an inappropriate relationship with a staff member, and they just released the news within the last hour or so. In terms of an official statement, said relationship was deemed inappropriate after an investigation by the university, so they don't have to worry about paying out the buyout. And now they are in the coaching search well after all these positions have been filled in terms of LSU, Florida, Virginia Tech, Penn State, so on and so forth. Who's next to be in charge of Michigan? Now, in my mind, I've got three top candidates that I think the university should call. Number one, I think, is a candidate who might be out of reach currently, but could be very, very interested in this job through all the rumors that we've heard. Number two is going to be a long shot due to their current job. And number three, I think, is an intriguing person who should get an opportunity, but again, I'm not sure if they will. So we're going to start from 3-1. And the individual that I think should get a lot of consideration for this, but he probably won't, is Texas Longhorns defensive coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski. This is a man who they're going to be facing in the bowl game, in the Citrus Bowl. But if there's one thing that wasn't disappointing overall this season is the Texas Longhorn defense, the type of studs that they have out in front and how they were used effectively. I think the Michigan fan base would fall in love with the way how he coaches defense. And I think, again, being involved with a program like Texas, you understand what it takes to recruit at a high level. You understand how important it is to develop the high school kids. And I think it wouldn't necessarily be the eye-popping name, but I think the results would be appreciated by the Wolverine faithful. That's why I think Pete is a interesting choice because, again, part of a large blue blood program that has recruited well, and he has put results out in the field. Number two, I would make the call and see if he's interested, and that's Jesse Minter, the current Los Angeles Chargers defensive coordinator. He was the Wolverines defensive coordinator from 2022 to 2023, and he was part of Jim Harbaugh's staff that secured the 2023 national championship. And he followed Harbaugh to LA to become his DC. The question with him is, will he want to go back to the college ranks, or will he wait for that hypothetical NFL opening that could occur in a few years? What's more alluring to him? To be the Michigan man who takes the torch from Harbaugh? Not that Moore didn't do that, but again, he made the choice to engage in said relationship. So he would be that continuation of that 2023 championship team. And again, he's shown the ability to wreak havoc on the defensive side. And as long as you hire a solid offensive coordinator, you keep Bryce Underwood and develop him over the next 2 years, you're going to be in strong contention in the Big Ten. Again, Michigan wasn't overly impressive this year, and they still had a season that a lot of people would be jealous of. I mean, you went out there and you went 9-3, but it's still something that considered a down year in the sense that you have certain talents. Again, Bryce Underwood is an individual that is thought of highly. And again, he was a true freshman. So it's unsure of how much was expected in this year without any playmakers. Michigan does not have high-level wide receivers. Again, you're not expecting them to be Ohio State, but you do have a talent in Underwood that has been compared in terms of his build and the way he could develop into something of a Cam Newton. And if you could get close to that, you're a national championship contender. Jesse Minter will provide that defensive prowess. It's up to him to find that offensive coordinator. Will he want to come back to college ranks? I don't know, but it's a phone call you have to make. And the person that I believe should be the next head coach at the University of Michigan is Kalen DeBoer. There's been some smoke about him and that job. Even though there was some smoke about the Penn State job, there were reputable people that said, ignore it. He's not interested in that job. But there is a Big Ten job that he's interested in. And you got to think, what would that Big Ten job be? It's not Ohio State. Again, it's not Penn State. Probably not USC. It would be Michigan. Will he be willing to leave Alabama? I think there's a higher probability than most people want to admit. And the only reason I'm saying that is because Kalen DeBoer is a really good head coach. He's recruited well at Washington. He has been recruiting well at Alabama as well. But there's something to be said about following a man who won seemingly a title every other year in Nick Saban. When you establish that form of excellence, it is incredibly hard to follow up. And to make matters worse, Nick Saban retired after he made the playoffs. Undeservingly so, but nonetheless, in his last year, he did make the playoffs. So it's not like he had a Bobby Bowden type phase where, Bobby did have like one last 9-win season before he retired. But again, it was more consistently in the 8-4, 7-6 range or 7-5 range, as opposed to the 14 straight top 5 finishes. Eventually, like Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech, consistently a double-digit winner. And his last few years at Virginia Tech, it was, again, 7-5, 7-6 type records before it's finally like, hey, man, you gotta step aside. That didn't happen with Nick Saban. Nick Saban went out with double-digit wins, finishing the top 10 consistently if he didn't make the playoffs. And if he did, which he usually did, he was in contention for a national championship. Kalen DeBoer went 9-4 last year, and he's 10-3 this year. Has not won an SEC championship. Has lost multiple games as double-digit favorite. Has had some shocking losses too. Again, the way they lost to Florida State did not go great. The way they didn't show up against Georgia most recently in the SEC championship game was not a good look. The way you lost to Vandy 2 years ago. The way you lost to Oklahoma 2 years ago. And you lost to Oklahoma this year, but last year's loss was a little more concerning. There's a lot of pressure to be the head coach at Alabama. And it is an appealing job. In its current state, you can bring a lot of talent in there. It's just a lot more difficult than people realize to win there. Kalen DeBoer can do the same things in Michigan and be celebrated more. And again, that's not an indictment on how the Michigan fan base is compared to Alabama in terms of its expectations. The Alabama fan base currently has unrealistic expectations. There's a reason why Nick Saban quit. He did not want to battle everyone in the NIL era. To him, it was more about recruiting players, developing them, and having the appeal of going to the NFL rather than the biggest paycheck or competing in the level of paychecks that these kids want and retaining them. Nick Saban didn't want to sit there and recruit high school kids and recruit his own kids that he's already recruited to stay. That's why he left. And again, we could dive into the fact that I believe Alabama's been paying players for quite some time and they just kept Nick Saban out of it. Or he just doesn't want to admit that it happened. I mean, Ed Orgeron just did a recent interview that said, you used to be able to walk the money back through the back door. Now you can just walk through the front door with it. It's clearly an unspoken thing. I mean, we're not going to dive into that. It's going to be off subject, but perhaps another time. DeBoer has to win the SEC every single year. He has to be competing for national championships. Every fan base wants that, but there's an understanding that it shouldn't happen every year because of a lot of various factors. Alabama fans still don't believe that. And DeBoer could get tired of that. Again, 9-4 isn't overwhelming at Alabama, but you saw the cracks in the foundation with Nick Saban his last year. 10-3 is an improvement over 9-4, obviously. And you did make the playoffs. So now you have a shot. Or you can go into the Big Ten and immediately be one of the top teams in the conference. If you're Michigan, you're currently behind your rival in Ohio State, you're behind Oregon, and right now you're behind Indiana. And then you're in the same bracket currently as like USC's and whatnot, where you're a solid team, but you're not in that upper echelon. You can give those guys a run for their money, but right now, no. With a guy like Kalen DeBoer that can immediately start leveling the playing field. He can recruit. He can develop. You've seen him recruit at Alabama. You've seen him recruit at Washington. You see him develop kids at Washington. And he's doing the same at Alabama in his short time there. He seems to be a better fit in the Big Ten than in the SEC. And in the Big Ten, it is a very top-heavy conference, like those teams that I named. But you're not always going to face those teams. And you could take advantage of that being there at Michigan, as opposed to the SEC now moving to a 9-game schedule. And Alabama, you're always going to play Auburn every year. You're going to play Tennessee every year. And then you mix in, I forget the third team that they have in rotation because they just announced that, a few months ago about how that's going to work. Kind of similar to the ACC and how they have certain rivalries set in stone, and then you're going to rotate everyone else. But again, Auburn's got Alex Golish. Let's see how that works out for them. Tennessee's doing really well, really solid under Josh Heupel. But you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to face LSU. You're going to have to face Georgia. The SEC, and we'll discuss this in my review of the college football playoff final rankings. The SEC, yes, is the deepest conference, but that doesn't mean they're the best conference. If you're Michigan, you're going to be playing Michigan State. You're going to be playing Wisconsin. Now, Michigan State just got a large sum of money allocated to them by generous donors, but it's going to take a while for that to come into effect, even with the hiring of Pat Fitzgerald, formerly of Northwestern. It is an easier path for Kalen DeBoer to win national championships and be a successful head coach at Michigan than it is at Alabama. And I'm not saying he's going to run away from a challenge, but again, the week in and week out expectations of this Alabama fan base, if Kalen DeBoer leaves, who's going to want to take that job? In reality, like you can go through a list of people, potential candidates. You could possibly poach Lane Kiffin away from LSU. He might have a soft spot in Alabama because that's the ultimate challenge for him. And he's coached there before, but you're already at LSU. Or are you going to bring in someone else who's been part of the staff? You're trying to bring in Dan Lanning. Why would he leave Oregon right now in the age of NIL with all of Nike money and all the donors there, et cetera? And he has that thing humming right now. You went undefeated last year. You won the Big Ten. You have one loss this year. You've gotten your coordinators poached away, and you're still succeeding. And you got your coordinators poached again. Both your offensive, defensive coordinators have left. Same thing's going to happen at Alabama. But does Alabama have the amount of backers in the NIL that Oregon does? It's safe to say no. I'm not saying Alabama's not competitive in the NIL era, but Oregon's on a different level. Oregon is the only school that recruited multiple 5-star prospects out of high school in the past cycle, in the 2026 recruiting cycle. Why would you want to leave that? You have all the money, you have all the resources that you need. What's another realistic option for Alabama? You're not going to go after Dabo Swinney, even though he played there, because of how Clemson's looked over the past few years. That was a year early on Clemson falling off. Now the cracks in the foundations have just caused the whole university to crumble under pressure. So again, does Alabama want Kalen DeBoer to leave? Realistically, no. But if he does leave, the chain reactions that are set off there are very intriguing. I think Michigan is one of the few jobs, if any, that Kalen DeBoer would be willing to leave Alabama for. And if I'm Michigan, I'm making him say no. I would match the amount of money that was offered to Lane Kiffin and currently to Kirby Smart, because Michigan definitely has the money to do that. Maybe in a different episode, we'll do a deeper dive as to why I believe that the allocation of resources to spending an incredible amount of money on a head coach doesn't work in today's era. But if you're Michigan, when you have huge backers from the likes of, Stephen Ross has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to that school, and they have other supporters as well that are even richer than Stephen Ross technically, but even ones that aren't as rich as him that are willing to support the school. You should have no problem with that, which is why you make him say no. So that's my list, folks. I got Kalen DeBoer at 1, Jesse Minter at number 2, and Pete Kwiatkowski at number 3. Those are my leading candidates for the job. I mean, maybe some sleepers, you might have Jed Fish, and I'm trying to think of anybody else. You wouldn't do Brian Kelly. That's not going to work out. But maybe Jed Fish is number 4. Then after that, I've seen some people talk about Joe Brady. I don't think that's happening. I think Joe Brady knows he's in line for a head coaching job in the NFL, so I don't think he's going to come back to college at this point, even though he was one of the architects of the 2019 LSU offense, since he was the passing game coordinator. So anyways, that was my top 3, with maybe some dark horses there in Jed Fish and Joe Brady. So we'll see where Michigan goes from here. This might be a longer process. It's not going to be as long as Penn State, but I think that Michigan's going to get their man and begin firing on all cylinders in terms of retaining Bryce Underwood and developing him, along with acquiring talent to make him successful. Because running backs wasn't the issue this year. It was the pass catch. So getting someone like DeBoer would go a long way with that. That's it for today's episode, folks. You know the drill. You can find us on YouTube at 305 Insights. Subscribe, turn those notifications on, like the videos, throw a comment out there. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars, subscribe there. And you can follow us on Spotify as well and rate us 5 stars there as well. However you may be listening, we thank you. And once again, thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Before we sign off, actually, I will cover the college football playoff final rankings. I know it's taking me some time to record that, but I'm still gathering my thoughts about that and opinions. And we will cover the end of year review for Florida State. And we can't really do the end of year for Miami as they've reached the playoffs. And we will also try and touch on the recent high school transfers, or we'll try and touch on the recent high school classes that have been coming in, as well as the transfers that are supposedly already starting to trickle out for Florida State. So a lot on the table, but we'll work on that. We'll get that out here. So thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.